Greetings and welcome to the Marginally Geeky Show. I'm your host for the evening, Eugene Stevens. Tonight, I'm joined by Jennifer and Ray. How are y'all doing?
Hi.
Good.
Just a quick side note, as you can obviously tell from the title of the episode, we have been reading the Star Wars Aftermath trilogy, and we were going to read the third and final book for this month's show, but we're still in the middle of the coronavirus. And we've had a lot of social activism leap out in the U.S. while everything is going on. So to be kind of timely, we decided to push the final book in that trilogy off for a month. We'll be finishing it up and reading that next month. So instead, we're going to read something that's definitely a little more timely. So that being said, I also want to go ahead and say one other thing. We don't normally jump into political things on our shows. I mean, we will touch on it and we'll make jokes from time to time. But we don't normally jump headfirst into political topics. This definitely being a little bit different case, because it is very timely and very much of what is going on in the United States. So, for anyone who might be, we consider most of our shows kind of evergreen, so you can go back and listen to them at any time. We are recording this on the first day of July in 2020, and the last month has been nothing but coronavirus updates. The numbers are going down in most of the other countries, except for the United States. They're going up.
Because we're number one.
Uh-huh. And the other thing that has happened was sparked off by the death of George Floyd, right? It's George, yeah.
He was the one that kind of
that's the one that
scales, but there were like 3 or 4 directly before that really built the powder keg up.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, and that's exactly how it happened. His death started it off because the video, there was very clear evidence of what happened. And then, like you said, there were 3 or 4 pretty close after that, and it has just gone.
Before it.
Yeah.
Right before, yeah.
Yeah.
Right before.
Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then he was kind of the last straw where people were like, this is too many. I mean, it's always been too many, but this is, right in a row. We can't handle this. And his video was particularly gruesome.
Yes, exactly.
And mention all of the other ones that haven't even been reported before, right? Like there's
videoed, yeah.
Yeah. So not only do we have the Black Lives Matter hashtag come back up, and the debate, whatever you want to call it, about that, it has grown into a movement that has also encompassed another hashtag that's going viral, and that is defunding the police. Now, like I said, the reason I want to bring this stuff up before we start reading the book is to give you an idea of the time in which we are referring, we're reading this book, why we're reading this book. And, anyone's opinions on this, are their own opinions. I think we're all pretty much kind of, not, I want to say lockstep, but we're all pretty much of the same mind on most of this stuff. But that being said, if this is a topic that you are uncomfortable talking about or reading about or listening about, or I'll be very honest, not in the current mindset to deal with. It can be completely that it's not that you don't care, you can't handle this right now. You may have a bunch of other stuff going on, like I do, which I'll talk about here in just a second, that this book was kind of hard to get through, not just because of the topic material, just because of everything else going on in my life. So that being said, if this is the type of topic that for whatever reason you don't feel like you're in the right mindset to handle or whatever, maybe come back and read it later. Maybe come back and listen to this episode later. But if it's something that you're just not comfortable dealing with, completely understand. We'll go back to reading fun sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that, which is our main topic, next month. One of the reasons I was okay with reading this book, though, is because this show does talk about geeky things, and everything can be considered geeky, and that includes politics. Like, there are politic geeks out there, and it's not just because they're a fanboy of one side or the other. It's just they really like politics. So that's why I was like, you know what, this falls under our wheelhouse. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and start off. When Jen suggested this book, I want to say it was the beginning of the month, right?
Sounds about right. Beginning of June.
It was about the beginning of the month, and I was like, okay, sure, that sounds cool. We'll read this book. Which, by the way, I still haven't mentioned. I mean, the title of the episode's on there, but the book that we're reading this month is How to Be Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi. And I was like, cool, sure, that's fine. We had a quick discussion about reading the book and who was going to read the book and so on and so forth. And then about a week later, on the 7th, my father passed away unexpectedly. And so I've been dealing with that, to include having high anxiety to the point that I sent myself to the hospital because I confused an anxiety attack with a heart attack. So needless to say, when I say that there was a lot of good stuff in this book, it was hard to read, not necessarily because of the topic material, but just because I was not really in the right mindset for this. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my house right now. We're putting in a pool. There's a bunch of stuff that's coming along with that I didn't realize was coming along with it. My job, I have a job, which is great. And I'm very thankful that I still have a job. But I don't know what my job is going to look like in the fall. I work at a high school, and in the state of Texas right now, the numbers keep going up. So we don't know what school is going to look like. So even though I have a job and I can't do anything about it, that's still in the back of my mind is what is going on. And then, like I said, my father passed away, and my brother has been very helpful. My family's been very supportive. My friends have been very supportive. But, I've been dealing with that. So trying to expand my mind and heart to help other people to be part of the fight, I have not had the mental or emotional bandwidth to do that. Our friend Lainey, I would say, is a little maybe on the other side. She's constantly posting stuff, which is fine. That's her deal.
Yeah, I wish Lainey would have joined us for this one because I know she's read it.
Has she read it? Well,
pretty sure she has.
But the only thing I did was there was the one day of like changing your icon to be black, for the blackout thing. And I understand there was some back and forth on that, but anyway, that's all I could muster. Like I can't deal with even the majority of the people that I follow on Facebook and stuff. I'm sure probably kind of feel like me. I do have some people that might be on the other side. I don't have the bandwidth or capability right now to post stuff. And like the most political thing I've been posting has been like our governor today finally said we are mandating masks for the rest of the month. And that was about as political as I'm willing to get right now, just because
it's so stupid.
It is stupid, but it's also like, I'm not going to get any pushback on that. I'm not going to get any, well, what about this? I don't have the mental capacity for that right now. And I would probably just reply, fuck you, and unfriend them. I'm just kind of in that mind space. So that being said, like I said, I wanted to get some of that stuff out there, kind of tell you where my mind was. Reading the book, I know this is kind of the part where we just kind of say whether or not really quickly, whether we liked it or not. I did enjoy the book. There are some places where I was like, ooh, you're getting a little far over there for me. But usually it was in the parts where he is describing the man that he used to be when he was a younger man. And I would say like literally not quite militant, but getting pretty militant on some things. But in the end, the ideas that he puts forth in this book are very much middle of the road, and I can completely get behind it. Like it's not to the point of, this is racist, so to be anti-racist, we have to pull back this other way and favor these other people. It's literally, no, to be anti-racist, like everyone has to be the same. There's not going to be We're not singling anyone out. Everyone needs to be the same. And I'm very much behind that ideology. So I did enjoy the book for that aspect. So, Ray, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I was going to jump in there and just say, yeah, the book it can be a hard listen, especially if you're not ready for some of the words that he uses in it. It is not one to be listening to if you're not prepared for, hearing words that I don't consider to be socially acceptable, and I don't think that they are socially acceptable. But they're used appropriately in the way that he describes, like you said, the way he used to be, as well as acknowledging certain things. I am appreciative that he went into the history of race and where kind of stems from. I'm thankful that I like those parts when he was going back into the history of the segregation of the different races and how that all started and everything, because I didn't know where it began, and so that was kind of a good part to listen to. But I mean, overall, I did enjoy it. There's sometimes it feels like he's hitting over the head too often with the idea, where it's like, okay, I get it, let's move on to the next part.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, okay, yeah, let's move on. But overall, I enjoyed the book to the point of self-reflection. Before this whole thing, I would have been one of the people that said, listen, I'm not racist, so I just try and treat everybody equally, and that's kind of how I just have always been. That's how I was raised. So that was kind of okay, you got to take the next step, and that's what this book was meant for me to be. Is okay, let's learn how to do what I need to do to at least support anybody that needs it. So,
Jen?
Yeah, so I was the one that suggested the book and did not finish because I had a scare last week, a COVID scare. It was negative, but I was kind of like out for an entire week. So playing catch up on a lot of things, and unfortunately didn't get through the whole book, but I will finish it. I think it's really important that we have these difficult discussions and that we challenge our belief systems, even if we think, we're the least racist person or we're the most understanding, open-minded person. The point of this discussion of this book and the discussions that have come from all of the, recent events is that we have to continue to challenge ourselves and that we can't get complacent, because this isn't a one-off thing, like we're going to fix it overnight or in a couple of years. Like, this is a lifetime thing, right? We have to continually work on ourselves and recognize the systemic racism that exists. And I mean, even as I was listening to this, thinking back through over the years, the things that I've learned, I realized, wow, that was pretty, small-minded of me, or I didn't realize, I was being racist in that way, or I was being closed-minded. So I think, recognizing our mistakes, as he said repeatedly, and being willing to learn from them is the best thing we can do. If we just deny that we have anything wrong with us, then we're part of the problem. So.
Yeah.
Well, let's go.
Yay. I appreciate everybody that's listening and you guys, being uncomfortable and trying to learn and, better ourselves.
So one of the things that we brought up when we first discussed whether or not we read this book or not, and especially discussing it, is do we need an outside opinion? Particularly possibly finding someone non-white. We'll just leave it at that. And my first opinion of it was, no, we don't need anyone else. If we want to invite someone else, that's great, especially if it was someone because we've had authors on before. So, if we found someone that had a particular viewpoint or was perhaps had a background in, say the study of this field or whatever, that would be acceptable. But just getting someone on there, I didn't feel like we needed that. The book show is our opinions of the books. There was a point, and like I said, I wasn't in the right mindset to read this book, so I'm going to be a little foggy here. But there was a point in the book, he said something that I felt justified my opinion in that. It was that, it doesn't matter who you are. Everyone has an opinion on this, and everyone's opinion needs to be heard and voiced. And so I was like, okay, cool. So yay, he feels the same way I do. So anyway, because yes, we have to recognize that it's three white people talking about a book on race, but that's kind of the key interesting thing about this book is that it's, to me, the main point of the book was, everyone's different. Races are different. Cultures are different, but we need to work towards systems where no one is singled out. Everyone is the same. And that's where I felt like I really agreed with the book. So, but in his earlier study, it talks about him growing up. I think the first story he tells, or one of the first stories he tells, is about him giving his graduation speech. And it was very much as he put it, looking down on black people, as in, everyone has the same opportunities. And if you're not here, it's because it's your choice. It's because you made the decision. And that's one of the things that's coming out, especially now in the media, is that, it's kind of a new term into our normal lexicon is systematic racism. And when you start explaining that, that's when it's just like, yeah, that's some bullshit. Like, because
we don't all have the same opportunities, and
no,
we're not all born into the same system. And
you look at it and you would, so let's take a school district, because he does bring that up, for example. Let's take a school district, for example. Granted, different areas of a city or what have you get taxed at different rates. But then when you look, you would think, okay, well then what will end up happening is every student, every school will get an equal portion of that pie. But that's not what happens. And I understand you live in a higher tax bracketed area. And so you would like to have, that having nice schools would be one of those things. But sorry, the money needs to get split up. Like, it should not be that on average, white students or black students or female students or male students or whatever it is, there should not be this vast difference in how much money every kid gets. And we see that, especially in the state of Texas. This was a huge problem years ago. They introduced Robin Hood, which was basically taking money from very high income school districts, like, say, larger cities, Dallas, Austin, so on and so forth. They were taking some of that money and they were dispersing it to low income cities. And people were having a problem with it. And it's just like, to me, I'm like, I always thought, I was always behind that idea. I was like, of course, like, it just take all of the tax money that's supposed to go to schools, put it in a big pot, and just start. How many kids do you have in your school? Here's how much money you get. How many kids do you have in your school? Here's how much money you get. That's how it should work. But that's not how it works.
No.
So.
And it's not just education. I mean, when you talk about inequities in funding, that plays a huge role, right? Because people are starting out in their formative years with less resources, teachers that aren't paid as well or don't have as many supplies or whatever the case is, or they're in older rundown buildings. But also, I mean, there's things like redlining that have occurred for years where African American families were not allowed to buy houses in certain neighborhoods, and they were basically segregated into certain parts of cities and states. Gerrymandering, restricts how the districts are set up so that when you go to vote, they specifically might cut in half a certain group of people to make sure that the vote gets split and the folks that they want to be in don't get elected. And I mean, so there's things like that the people don't even think about. And that's on top of, the hundreds of years of, coming from an ancestry based in enslavement, and the fact that after enslavement ended, those folks did not have, access to bring themselves up, and a lot of people were struggling, and then there were, Jim Crow. So, I mean, you got to go all the way back. You can't just look at it today and say, well, why aren't you working? You're lazy and you're not, pulling yourselves up from your bootstraps, because some people don't even have boots, so
yeah,
that's just not how
but
it works.
Like, he even goes into it, right, where he talks about his education and how they paid for this extra course for him to get ready for the SATs, and they just teach them how to write the SAT so that he does better on that part. And he's like, why isn't this just taught everywhere? So that, and it's almost as if they specifically do this so that people that don't have access to that do work.
They don't have money.
Yeah.
And like he
it's
said,
like a poll tax to vote.
Yeah, and everyone freaking, like, in education, most everyone in education fucking hates the SATs and everything else. Those standardized tests are bullshit, because like he said, what the class he took was not teaching him to be smarter. It was teaching him how to take the test. Here's how they want you to answer. Here's how you need to think about when you answer. Because I'll be honest with you, when I went through my master's program to get my ed certification, that was one of the classes that we went over. Was they specifically told you, when you go to take this test, it's going to give you a situation. Do not answer the way you think it should happen. Answer the way it would happen in a perfect world. And we're like, are you serious? And they're like, yes. If you answer how in a perfect world this should be handled, you'll pass the test. Yeah, sure enough. Flying colors. But it's just like, if, granted, I went through what I thought was a really good program, but if you didn't tell anyone that, you would go through a master's program and be like, well, why can't I pass the test? I'm answering
all that money for nothing.
Exactly. And it's because they want you to answer in a certain way. So yeah, when he brought that up, I specifically was just like, right on. So
yeah. And I think part of this journey of becoming an anti-racist, right, is like I said earlier, recognizing what you don't know. I mean, I'll give an example from my life. Growing up, I would say I viewed the police as people that keep me safe, right? If I ever felt unsafe, I felt confident in calling the police. Or, if I was pulled over by one, I've had enough speeding tickets in my life to know what that's like. I never thought I wasn't going to make any sudden movements, but I never thought to like put my hands in the air and announce everything I was doing. It was just, okay, I'm getting my wallet. I would, open my glove box. Never had an issue. But as I've gotten older and listened to my friends and the stories of others, I realized that's not the experience everyone has. And that's something I never would have known if I hadn't been willing to just pay attention to other people, because me just saying, well, that's not how it is for me, so stop complaining, is not the answer. The answer is I need to acknowledge that my experience is different from yours and respect that and try to help make your experience equitable to mine.
Yeah, it's a couple years ago, I remember reading this article and it stuck out to me just because, unlike you, Jen, like my dad's a cop. He's retired now, but I was raised with knowing that the police are there to help me, and so to not have that, I don't even know what that would be like. So this article that I read was about a woman, and this is going back to one of the, like I said, a couple years ago when somebody else had passed away because of police brutality, and she wrote that she was in her late 20s. She had the kids in the car. She was moving out of an area, and they were moving to this other area, and she was really tired, and she realized that she was starting to get lost. She's really nervous, and all of a sudden the cherries come on and she's getting pulled over, and she's terrified because she's a black woman in this other neighborhood and she doesn't know where she is. And the police officer, to his credit, came up to her and was like, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she said, "No, I'm so sorry. What did I do wrong?" And he's like, "Listen, I just pulled you over because you looked lost. You looked like you needed some help. I just wanted to check in on you." And she just immediately started bawling because she'd never known that help before. And that's terrifying that somebody doesn't know just because of the color of the skin. It's not something that I can ever even think of knowing, and it's so that one stuck out to me just because it's such a moving story. So
that definitely did not end the way I thought it was going to when you started. So I'm glad that was a happy story.
But it was the happy story that made me realize, like, she was terrified. I remember, like, she thought she was going to jail that night because she was lost in the wrong neighborhood, and the cops like, "Listen, I'm just trying to help you." Like, it's.
So can you imagine? I mean, both of y'all are parents, having to have that discussion with your kids at 5 or 6, saying, if you see a police officer, you freeze, you put your hands in the air, and you don't make any sudden movements, because they have to be taught at a young age, children of color, that their bodies are weapons, as he says in the book. My black body is a threat to you because of the color of my skin, so I have to do twice as much to not appear like a threat. I mean, I watched a video, it was heartbreaking, and it was from a few years ago, where parents had the talk with their kids, and I mean, it was just like heart-wrenching to see the kids' reaction and of course the parents' reaction. And it's like, nobody should ever have to have that talk with their children. But again, that's something I never knew growing up, and hearing about it now is just like unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think it also has to do, especially with the area that you're in. I mean, granted, it could definitely be happening here more than I know about it. But I mean, I also have several friends that are police officers and such, and talking to them, it's just, they're like I said. Now, granted, our area also had a peaceful protest, and the police literally showed up to show their support. So I think we're in a little bit different situation, especially than like the larger cities like Dallas and Austin is having some huge issues.
But Killeen is a very diverse city. I mean,
exactly.
We're a military town, and I think, I'm not saying racism does not exist here, and
it definitely does, but it's definitely different here. Because like us, and
right.
And kind of going back to what you were saying, Ray, I've always said, no, I'm not. Hell, I can't be a racist in Killeen, not in Survive. But I mean, like, my friends growing up were Korean, Syrian, Mexican, black. It's just like, it was just, I'm prejudiced, but I'm prejudiced against assholes. Like, I don't, I really don't care what the color, especially, I mean, if you look, and this is one of those things that's like, you're racist if you have to point out you have black friends. But I mean, it's like the group of guys that I hang out with at the campus tech meetings, 3 of them are black. The other 2 guys are as white as I am. And I mean, we're the ones that everyone is like, those are the assholes back there making jokes and making snide comments and stuff like that. And I'm like, I gravitated toward these guys because they're all hardworking. They all know their shit, and they're cool dudes. So, I have to keep in mind that just because the situation maybe isn't like that exactly here, or at least not that I see, it's not always the case. For example, my father, when we buried him in a little town called Bartlett. I brought up one time to my group of friends at the campus state meeting something or another about Bartlett, and the 2 black guys looked at me and are like, you go to Bartlett? I'm like, I haven't been there in years. I said, that's where my grandfather's buried. And they're like, yeah, black folks don't go to Bartlett.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
even
okay, cool. That's all I need to know.
Even Florence. I mean, I have a friend who's Hispanic, and he said, nope, I pulled over into a gas station once and I got the, can I help you look? And he's like, no, I'm good. And he just left. I mean, you don't have to go very far outside of Killeen to experience that. And, living in the South, there's still a lot of small towns that are very small-minded.
Yes.
Well, and I will say, after the Black Lives Matter movement started up again, and I don't mean that it started, because it never left after years ago. There's been a push, especially in Canada, because there's racism up here, but it's not. It's been well hidden. There were some horrible schools that were for the Native kids. I can't remember the name of them off the top. Residential.
First Nations or?
No, it was a residential school is what they called them. And they would pull kids out of their family and force them to go to these schools. And do you remember the name of the kid? There was a young kid anyway. He ran away from the school to go back home and died in the middle of nowhere, just trying to get back to his family because he was so far away from them. Wow. And we didn't learn it, like, this was happening right up until
1996 was the last one I closed.
96?
Wow.
So 1996 was the last close, and that's insane to me. Like
entire generations of cultures are lost.
We didn't know anything about it, and we didn't learn about it in the schools. I'm thankful that our daughter was learning about it in her history class. It's something that Canada has acknowledged now, and that they're trying to at least accept that it's part of our past. But it's just devastating to learn that we pride ourselves on being a welcoming group and an accepting country, but we can't even accept our own natives, and that's pretty sad. So.
And I think that's important, though, that all countries have some kind of bad periods, right? But we need to acknowledge them, and if we don't, it's so disrespectful to the folks that had to experience that and their ancestors. I mean, in the U.S., we talk about slavery and the Native Americans in school, but it's not like you really get the they gloss over it. You don't get the full story. And then once you get to college and you start actually reading about this stuff, you're like, oh no, we were pretty horrific to, I mean, and even the Japanese internment camps,
I was just
the eugenics
about to bring
movement.
that up.
I mean, we've done some really shitty things to people who are not white, and even some groups within European descent.
Even white people, because he brings up like how the Irish were treated, in New York.
Catholics
like we've been shitty to everyone at some point or another. It's just.
But we need to acknowledge it and not forget about it so it doesn't happen again, because I mean, it's happening again.
Yeah. The thing that I like that he brought up though was what he doesn't stand for, what anti-racist doesn't stand for. Because I've heard a lot of people say, and it's something that I was guilty for too, is, I don't see color, right?
Yeah.
I see your character. And
I'm colorblind, yeah.
I'm colorblind, right? And part of the problem with that is that then you expect everybody to act the same in every situation, and you don't accept their culture potentially. And I like the fact that everybody in an anti-racist world, you're accepted for your culture, you're accepted for your history, and but it's all treated equally, and I think that's important.
It's celebrated instead of looked down on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, rather than saying it doesn't exist, or
I mean, that's something I had to unlearn too, is that being colorblind is not the ideal thing, because we kind of grow up hearing, oh, I'm colorblind, everyone's the same, I don't see color, blah, blah, blah. But then you realize, that you're kind of offensive that way.
Yeah.
And being anti-racist is better than being colorblind. There's a difference.
Right. Yeah.
Different. Yeah. It's
Well, so at my at the viewing for my father, Lainey's boyfriend is he's Greek, but he also has Mexican heritage, and he asked her, he's like, so when's the party, and where are we having it? And she's like, what do you mean? He goes, well, usually when someone when Mexican people die, like it's the viewing and then it's an all night party until the thing. And it was like, yeah, we don't really do that. And it like kind of blew his mind a little bit, but it's just like, yeah, I understand that. I could see that. And it's one of those things like, we joke, and he especially likes to joke about it. Just that, yeah, he's different. And, he takes his white girlfriend down to meet the Mexican family members, and, she can't handle, barely any hot stuff and, stuff like that. But yes, it's poking fun, but it's also acknowledging the difference. But I mean, like his family, like freaking loves her to death. Like we've taken him, like, I've already started calling him my brother-in-law. Like he hasn't technically even proposed yet. I'm just like, yeah, it's my brother-in-law. It's Joseph. So, but yeah, noticing and recognizing those differences. Well, like my friend Lewis, he came up he knew my dad. Yeah, hell, I've known Lewis since I was 5. He came up, and just reconnecting with him was great when he was up here, for my dad's funeral and stuff. But his family was, we knew he was Mexican. They did things differently than we did. We did different things, and it was just like, cool. Let me be part, if y'all are cool with me being here and being part of this, let me be part of this or whatever. So, like I call his mom. Like I haven't seen her in a while. And when I get, whenever I saw her at the funeral, I was like, hi Mom, how are you doing? And like, it's, there's a difference, like you said, and I was guilty of that as well. I'm being colorblind, but in honesty, I'm not. I see I see who you are. I want to see who you are. And, if you're one of those people who is just like, no, whatever, I'm just, I'm not that traditional or whatever, that's cool. If you are traditional, cool. Whatever you want to share and explain, I'm open to. And I've always tried to be that way, but I did use that term, like you said, of being colorblind, not realizing kind of what it really represented. And this book opened my eyes to that. I'm like, no, I'm not colorblind, and I won't say that anymore. I'll be like, no, I recognize you as a black man. Are you cool? Do you know what you're doing? Are you not an asshole to other people? We can be friends.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There was something else I was going to bring up. I cannot remember what it was. If someone else got something else to say, but I'll mention it.
I was going to jump back to what we started with, the discussion about systemic racism. So
yes.
I wrote something down that stuck out to me. He said, Americans have long been trained to notice deficiencies in people versus deficiencies in policy. Yes. And that really hit me because I think the example he used was like welfare or, some kind of public assistance, right? And people like to argue that, well, the folks that are on welfare are on it because they're lazy and they don't, want to get a job and they don't want to work, whatever, versus the policy behind it that made it necessary, like the laws that are in place or the restrictions or whatever that make people live in this cycle of poverty. And I thought that was really interesting because if you look at a lot of the laws going back through history, you can kind of see how that set up, this ripple effect to get folks where they are today.
The other thing that I was very interested that he said was that the majority of, especially Black people that were able to get the social assistance wouldn't take it because they didn't want that handout, because they didn't want to be that person. And I've been on what we call it POGI up here, right? It's an unemployment insurance, and so that way when I lost my job, I had some money still, and it allowed me to get through a couple of months in order to get another job and continue our life afterwards. And it's there for a reason, and I'm thankful it's there, and I wish that it was more accepted to be on it if you need it, because as soon as you're on it, you feel dirty, you feel like, I feel like I'm taken from people, and you want to get it off as soon as you can. So
it's a hand up, not a handout.
That's right.
Sometimes folks just need, like you said, a little bit to help them get through the tough times, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well, like there's that common misconception that if you're on welfare, that just automatically means you're lazy, you don't have a job, lots of other things go along with that. that you're a drug user, so on and so forth. And, there was a state that was, and I have to say, at first I thought, well, that kind of makes sense. Absolutely. If you're going to be on welfare, you have to get drug tested. And so they did it, and they spent millions of dollars to catch like 75 people, which, they canceled their welfare, which ended up being like, $50,000 if that. And it's like, so you spent $7 million or whatever the number was to basically cut people off of $50,000. Y'all wasted a crap ton of money. But I'm glad y'all did it, not us, so that, everyone else can hopefully go, okay, yeah, this is a stupid idea.
Dumb.
But you get that mentality, like you said, of, well, if I'm on these systems, that automatically makes me this type of person.
But here's the thing: even if there are people out there that take advantage of the system, I'm not going to deny that, right? There are shitty people who don't want to work. They figure out how to work the system. They keep having kids, whatever, to get their welfare checked. I will not deny that, but that is such a small percentage of the folks that are on that assistance. And I would rather give money to those folks if it means that the 95 to 98% of the people that actually need it get their assistance than take it away from everybody because of that 1 or 2%. I mean, in a country that claims to be so, Christian and caring about your neighbors and all that, we really, shit on people who need help. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not going to mince words here.
Here's a good example. My wife transferred to another campus. The campus she is at right now is a low income school, and every student that goes there gets free breakfast and lunch. Of course, we took advantage of it. We're like, well, we don't have to make lunches and breakfast for the boys, and they actually like it because most of their other friends are eating the same lunches and breakfast as well. To the point that they get on Christy for, we want to be the first ones in line or close to the first ones in line. Mommy, can you hurry up? But whenever COVID hit, and of course a lot of stuff closed down, a lot of the schools in our district continued to hand out breakfast and lunches. Which I thought, is great. It needs to happen. I feel bad about the poor employees that had to do that, though, because, if they were being properly shielded, it wouldn't have been such an issue, but I don't think that was happening in the beginning. So, but anyway, so my wife finds out about this announcement, and they're basically said, if your kid in the state of Texas attends one of these schools and falls into one of these 3 categories, you are eligible for basically a government assistance card for food. And she's like, I'm going to apply for it because we technically fall under this thing. And I was a little hesitant at first. I thought, man, I don't know if I feel good about this because am I taking money away from someone else? And then I talked to a friend of mine that's kind of in one of these systems, and they told me, you had better freaking take it. And I was like, okay. And they're like, here's how it works. They look at, here's how many kids we have. We're going to budget this much money for it. If you don't take it, that percentage goes down, and the government looks at it as, oh, well, then we don't need to put as much money into these systems.
Use it or lose it, yeah.
And it's like, well, then, yes, I'm glad we're taking it and using it. Yes, it does help out my family right now. It's not like I'm taking it away from someone else, but I'm like, I'm actually doing a service by taking it because that would suck for them to look at a percentage, and especially if it's a very slight margin of, oh, well, we didn't reach, 67%. We only hit 66%. We're going to cut the funding by 25%. Or, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. All imaginary numbers. But I definitely see that shit happening. And like I said, talking to someone who works in those type of systems. And so, like you were saying, we have people out there who genuinely need the help, but don't want that label and won't do it. And so less funding goes into it. Yeah. And yeah, it's, that's heartbreaking. So I'm like you, Jen, I'd rather, yes, there are some bad apples out there, but they're bad apples in everything. So,
and then what happens? Well, I was just saying, then what happens is they don't take the help. Heaven forbid they get sick. They have to go to the ER. They can't afford, the health care. It ends up going back to us, and we end up paying more for it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a healthcare example, obviously, but like the same can be said for a lot of forms of assistance. And honestly, like people are in poverty, then a lot of times they do turn to crime, petty thefts or whatever, because they're hungry, they need to get by. Just give people some basic assistance and they won't get to that point. It's all, like we were talking about, systemic and kind of built in.
The other thing I was going to say about the whole systemic thing, I was fascinated to hear his story about Florida and the vote that happened with George Bush and
Yes.
The hanging Chad.
That whole thing blew my mind. But then to read the newspaper or some of the news on Kentucky and what was going on there,
I was going to bring that up.
I am shocked that that's going on. And you know what? I'm part of me is not, now that I'm thinking about it, because if they actually allowed everybody to vote that wanted to vote, then I have a feeling that the current regime would never get in.
Cocaine Mitch would probably not still be the head of the majority, Senate majority. So yeah. But it's no, I was going to bring that up because that's a very obvious thing. Like that was not trying to, that was under the ruse of we need to be safe for COVID, which is a legitimate thing, but the way that it was done was ridiculous. And the fact that it was done in certain areas over others was clearly a breakdown for, we only want certain people who are most likely going to vote a certain way to make sure they get, don't or do get in.
Was it Jacksonville that had one voting station?
Mm-hmm. For like, yeah.
Hashtag voter suppression.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
It is insane. You know this, you don't even live in this country, but the voting system in America is shit. It's laughable. There are so many ways to suppress the vote still. We have voter ID laws in Texas. You have to have an ID card to vote. They just make it so hard. Some places don't have early voting, same day voting, or registration. We have to register 30 days before, and there's just so many things we could do across the board to make it easier for everybody to have access to vote. Not to mention the Electoral College. Don't even get me started.
Oh yeah.
Don't get me started on that one.
The thing that kills me about someone brought up something or another. I don't remember what it was right offhand, but they were like, my bank, I'm able to bank online and that's my money, but I can't be allowed to vote because y'all are scared. Now, granted, the voting stuff that the electronic voting stuff that some of the groups tried doing, like especially back before everything blew up, was that Utah? Was an absolute disaster in the Democratic primary.
The primary in Iowa.
Iowa, that's what it was. Yeah, the Iowa primary was garbage.
Bet on that.
But this is not something that should be that hard. Hell, if they tell you can only vote by holding up your ID picture next to your face and taking a picture and submitting it, okay, sure, fine, whatever. But make it so that's another way for people can vote. There shouldn't be, so.
The caucus system is stupid.
Oh yeah, the caucus is garbage. But
and it does kind of discourage voter participation because it's not anonymous, it's not accessible to everybody. So there are issues with that. But luckily, that's not how the majority of states do it.
Yeah, but it's like you said, so and he talks about that, systemic racism. You've got not only government funding, but you've got, like you said, voting. You've got the education system that is just, whacked out. Like, for example, whenever COVID started happening, they came forward and said, we're going to start handing out laptops to students. They have to meet certain qualifications, the laptops do. Looking at it on my campus, I have about 150, between 140 and 150 general use laptops for general use for students. I have several other labs that are desktops, but those are also general use. I have a total of I want to say 60 or 70 mobile labs. Probably half of them are laptops with at least 25 laptops apiece. But they're all for specific, specially funded groups. And I was not allowed to use those because I was like, well, I know you're saying a student needs a laptop, a Windows laptop, because all I had were Macs. I know you're saying they need a Windows laptop, but this was bought with STEM money by the federal government. I can't just give this to any kid. Yeah. Unless y'all are telling me the rules out the window, which they didn't tell me that. But it's like, and I've always hated that term anti-racist because it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's like, no, it's still racist. It's just racist against someone else. Which 90% of the time, that's not the case.
No, you mean not anti-racist.
Not anti-racist. I mean reverse racism. That's what. Yeah. Sorry, I misspoke there.
It's like that's what we're talking about, though.
Yes, I know, right? That Eugene, have you lost your brain? But no. And so it's one of those things. It's like and I complain about this. I'm like, I've brought so many new computers onto this campus, but they're only for certain kids. And I understand it's coming from government funds, and I'm happy to have the stuff. And we do kind of find ways around it so that general ed students can use it. But it's gotten to the point, some of these special programs have gotten to, it really puts, so unless your kid is in a specific group and they're just a general average kid, they don't get the support that they need. And that goes back to that $1 per kid, spent. It's just, and once again, going back to this COVID thing, it's like, I only had to hand out. Now, granted, most of the kids knew that it really isn't going to make a huge difference on their grades, but I only handed out about 40 or 50 laptops to students that said that they needed them to do online learning or whatever. And you could very clearly see, because I got all this information from the parents, because I still have to get a bunch of them back, but I'm like, I need your address and your phone number and this, that, and the other. And getting them back is hard because a lot of these people don't have phones and they don't have a general internet connection, and their addresses all seem to be hitting in about the same area of the town. And it's like, this is very clear. And especially in a, I don't know what it's not pre or post, it's current. In a current COVID situation with education, the kids who are able to stay home and have, a decent internet connection are going to have a vastly superior advantage over those who don't.
So, and
that's bullshit.
This ties into something that I just was thinking about. So the other thing that he brings up is the whole capitalism and racism. And Eugene, you and I had a beginning of a conversation a little while ago. I was saying capitalism does not work. And now I kind of see why as to what he was tying it into racism. And can you
summarize that, because I haven't gotten to that part yet.
So the other interesting thing about this whole COVID thing, and wouldn't it be amazing if somebody who's almost going to be a billionaire or trillionaire, he's almost a trillionaire. Wouldn't it be amazing if he said, you know what, I'm going to buy every student in America a computer to make sure that they have access. Because he's got the money for it. He is raking in the money, and he's treating his employees like absolute shit. And so it would be amazing if that asshole would actually get off his ass. Something.
Jeff or Mark or who we talking?
Jeff. We're talking about Jeff.
The Amazon is like, what a piece of shit. So it would be absolutely amazing if he came out and said, you know what, I'm going to support America because that's where I made my millions and billions, and we're going to actually help out everybody, and everybody gets an equal computer, and we're going to make sure that they have access that they need in order to actually educate everybody the exact same way. But yeah, it pisses me off that you have people like that. It spreads out even further, right? Like, and he talks about it in the book as well, where the top percentage of the money is all going to these little bit of people way up at the top.
Yeah.
And they have more than what they could ever need.
The middle class is disappearing, and
Yeah.
the rich are getting richer. The poor. What is it, like 1 or 2% of the population owns 80 or 90% of the wealth in the world?
It's something stupid
ridiculous.
like
that. Is it like that in Canada? Like, is the distribution of wealth as bad?
It's
up there?
It's pretty worldwide.
Yeah.
The last thing I read was it's pretty worldwide. So.
Yeah.
And yet, you have those occasional people that step out of that mold. That's like Bill Gates, that was like the richest man in the world, and was like, you know what? I'm gonna stand about malaria. No one seems to be worried about this. So you know what? Fuck y'all. I'm gonna do what I want, and just like, and it's
there are standout companies and leaders and business people. Like Patagonia paid, I mean, they already put 1% of their profits towards environmental and sustainability issues, but they took the money they would have paid in taxes after Trump's tax cuts and they donated it. They said, you know what? This is all money we were going to pay in taxes. We're going to donate it to a nonprofit.
My biggest problem was, I'm sorry. I was going to say, my biggest problem was because when Ray and I started having this conversation, that was one of the reasons, that was one of the issues that I didn't completely agree with. I think, I guess you want to say ideologically or pure capitalism can work. The problem we have is the idea behind capitalism should be that if you're the best, you should rise to number one. The problem what we have is that the people who did that then went to the politicians and had laws passed that keep anyone else from competing. That's where I have the biggest problem.
Or like Ray said, they invest outside of our country. They move their operations so they can make even more money.
Right. And in a lot of cases, it's moving overseas and,
modern day slavery in a lot of those cases.
Yes.
Places that do not have humane working conditions or pay or anything.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's, we differ a little bit there, but I mean, I see it. I can't completely follow that. And I don't know, maybe that's just the old school Republican that I used to be. That's the last remnant of it still in me. But, okay, let's take, for example, Etsy. It's a pretty level playing field. So I feel like yes, the better you do, it gets a little bit.
Face.
I know, but you also had copyright issue. I know that, but.
Nope, not even that. I'll get in here in a minute.
Okay, but so like that, for example, it's possible to compete against other people. Now, there are ways to game the system and everything else, but for the most part, it's not overly bad, at least where I'm at. Now, I'm sure there are other people who are probably doing other things in it. And there are probably some people who've become giants and have completely gamed the system so that when you search for whatever it is, it's all of their shit listed in the first 3 or 4 rows and no one else gets a chance to sell it, and it's, so like I said, I think there are still some places where it's still kind of a level playing ground, but I also know that there, let's look at cable and internet, which I still think is a fucking basic human need at this point. Like, at this point, the government should be telling everyone, listen, you're going to offer internet for, say, high-speed internet for $5 a month, something ridiculously cheap, or we're just going to come in and wipe you out. But most municipalities, including ours, right now, you can only have one cable company. Now, there are ways to get around it by having different like phone connections or something like that. Like you could go through AT&T or something in some places, but in most places you get one cable provider. That's it. If you don't want cable, you got to find something else to do. And most of the time it's nowhere near as good. That type of stuff is bullshit. Electricity. My wife sells electricity. It's the same way with electricity. She's tried selling it to different places and they're like, sorry, we can't offer it down there. It's not that we don't want to offer it down there. It's that this electrical company has made a deal with it, with the city, and that's it. If you want electricity, you come through us. You pay our prices, or you don't get electricity, and that's anyway.
So what I was gonna say is, it's and forgive me, this is probably going to come off as rude, but I believe that Americans are fed a lie from the very beginning. When you're born, you're told that you can do anything you want to do, and you're told that you can be whatever you want to be. And
the American dream.
And if you work hard enough and you put enough hours in, you can make it too. And that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Because look at how many people are working 70 hours a week just to make it.
2 or 3 jobs, yeah.
3 jobs just to make ends meet. That's insane. And that means that we're not treating our people properly.
No, I agree.
Yep.
But they're fed this belief that if they continue to work hard every day, that they can make it too. And it doesn't exist.
That the system is set up, to make you fail, to make you think I've got to work a 40-hour week job and have 2 side hustles and go to school and it's like, no, I don't fucking live to work. I'm not about that life. So
it's a new type of way to make sure that the rich stay rich, because
So here's where we've had class issues, right, for hundreds of years. That's not new. America, started developing a middle class, mid 20th century, kind of after World War II. That I think that's kind
World
of
War II is really what kicked it off. You're right.
Yeah, everyone came home and, economy was doing good. We had, people making money, going to school. The boomers were born into that, life. That's what they knew. That's what they had growing up. Now they're looking at millennials and Zoomers, Gen Xers, and saying, what the hell's wrong with you? Why can't you make it? We had this, and this. There's no reason for you to be struggling. And the world that they grew up in is different from the world that we're growing up in, because, they've kind of ruined education and job opportunities and passed all these laws, like you said, that give big corporations money. And it's like, these are systemic things that are hurting everybody, but they're hurting specific populations more than others. So
go get a college degree for $100,000 so you can start off life that far in debt.
Yep. Yeah.
And you can't get a job because you don't have the you have the education, but you don't have the experience.
Yep.
So how do you get a job?
Yep. Exactly.
So while I understand that you're saying everybody has a level playing field, it is a very different playing field.
A level playing field on, let me be very specific. Everyone has a level playing field on something like Etsy.
Sure.
That's what I meant. Because you can have a store, if you start to, if you sell stuff, it starts to pick up, you can actually do okay. That's what I'm saying.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with you just for a little bit, because I'm going to put it on a different spin. Let's say that it was a pop that you came up with, it was soda that you came up with, and it's a brand new root beer of some sort, and it's amazing tasting, and it beats Barks, and it beats everything else, and you put it out there, and everybody agrees with you, and then it starts getting some momentum, and actually it builds out of cytokine. Next thing Dallas and Houston have it, and then somebody catches wind because Pepsi says, fuck, we don't want that, so they're either going to offer you money, and if you say no, they are going to spend their money, their ad money, to absolutely destroy you. And next thing you know, they're going to have all these horrible reviews and everything on your product saying that you're a piece of shit. And it's not true, but they can destroy you because they have the money to do it.
I understand that. And that is complete. And I thought about the same thing. I mean, technically speaking, the things that I sell, well, at least the big thing that I sell, could be considered copyright. It's also could be considered my artist interpretation of it.
Yep.
But honestly, if Hasbro comes knocking, it's like, well, I can't really even afford to have a lawyer to try to battle this out. So I understand where you're coming from completely. And on a small scale, I understand. I think it still works, but I understand what you're saying. Once you start swimming in too big of an ocean with too big a monster, I'm not even gonna say sharks, fucking monsters, then it's,
you don't have a shot.
There's no room for the little
guys. I mean,
guys.
honestly, what is it called? Tesla should not fucking exist, but it does. They managed to beat the odds.
Issues.
Yeah. The thing that I think one of the reasons for Etsy why it is more of a level playing field. It just goes back to what I just said. The internet should be a fucking utility that everyone should have access to. It should not be expensive as shit as it is because it does give everyone a much more level playing field. But now we're getting really into economics, so. But he, like you said,
let's take it back to the book.
But he did say that. He did specifically say, you know, and the way that he phrased it, he's right. A lot of capitalism was built on the back of slaves. So, yeah, they're tied together. Like I said, I think it is separating, but unfortunately there's just so much shit underneath it. It goes back to we need to look at these policies that we have in place, some of them very long standing, but we need to go back and look at these policies that we have in place and what they're actually doing, and do they even fucking make sense anymore? So I was going to throw one thing out there. This might be a little controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. You know what? I'm not. I will save that for the after show, just because evaluating it we'll go into it later.
Okay.
Anyway.
Does he talk at all about environmental racism or intersectional environmentalism?
I don't think he touches on environmentalism at all.
No, okay, wait a minute. He does bring up the fact that like environmental impact definitely tends to affect particularly the poor in southern states, right, where like anytime that, you know, we have hurricanes and shit like that. He did bring that up as a situation.
So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, there's a lot of studies that show that natural disasters disproportionately affect people of color or people in poverty. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, these disasters disproportionately affect those communities because a lot of times they're pushed into undesirable locations like floodplains or, you know, areas that have a landfill or, you know, just some kind of a negative thing, a NIMBY that, you know, I don't want that in my backyard, but somebody's got to live there, right? So you've got that going on. And then you've also got, you know, just the fact that the folks in these situations can't afford to move away from them. And also there's just not a lot of participation, you know, for one reason or another in nature, in the outdoors by a lot of these communities because it's just not accessible to them or they don't feel welcome there. So there's recognizing that there's in the environmental, you know, impacts that are, it's all connected, but that's yet another way that, you know, people of color are disproportionately impacted, and the people that have the privilege are the ones causing most of those issues. So I don't know if I articulated that well.
He did touch on that. He didn't go into it a lot, but he did mention the fact that, you know, when there's specifically things like hurricanes and stuff like that, it's you know, it is certain people, you know, especially when we're looking at like Louisiana, that when we had those massive hurricanes, it was mostly, you know, African American people that were hit the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, the effects of climate change are hitting the communities that are not responsible for it, you know, that aren't causing it. I mean, even up in Canada and Alaska, there's areas where tribes are having to move from their native grounds because the permafrost is literally falling into the ocean and it's disappearing. It's so devastating to see that like the folks who are the most innocent are getting affected the worst by the things we're doing.
It's a throwaway line in a movie. It's Maverick. I don't know if you remember the Mel Gibson Maverick. It was one.
Oh, good old Mel Gibson back before
he was batshit crazy.
What is it called? Canceled? Is that what? No. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So he's speaking to a Native American about how gorgeous the area is because the native is you know, in this great amazing area. You got a mountain over here and like a bunch of trees and stuff, and he's like, oh, it's such a beautiful spot. And the Native American looks at him and he's like, yeah, you know what, next time I'm going to pick a swamp because you guys keep maybe then you'll leave me alone because you keep taking my hand. And it points to what you're talking about. It's, you push them to the areas that you don't want because, well, at least they, how can you complain? I gave you land. Well, yeah, you gave me.
Yeah,
Right?
think about the Native Americans that were pushed onto the
Think,
reservations. And
here in Canada, we're still fighting to try and get a lot of tribes, a lot of different areas, clean water, which is still insane
the
to me.
pipeline. Oh, that's another thing. The pipelines that
thing.
are being run through, these low-income communities, and that, you don't see that shit happening in white communities. Flint, Michigan, still does not have clean water. I mean, come on. There's just so much environmental disparity, and it's because it's not a priority. Because, well, I have what I need, and I don't think about the fact that, other people don't.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend my money to help you.
It's inconvenient for me, so I'm just going to keep living my life instead of trying to equal the playing field and, make sure we all have access.
Well, we've been going for almost an hour, so let's go ahead and start kind of wrapping up. Like I said,
gone on a lot of tangents. Sorry, listeners.
Well, they are tangents, but they also wrap back into the central thing. And like I said, for me, the central takeaway from this was, I'm like you, Ray. I used to say, well, I'm colorblind, or I don't see color, which that wasn't the case, but it sounded good until it was kind of explained to me a little bit better. And I was like, okay, yeah, that I understand where that doesn't sound the way I think it sounds. It sounds differently to someone else. But the big takeaway from me from the book that I did like the idea is that it wasn't, we need policies that are going to help specific people. We need policies that help everyone, like literally flat across the board. If you need help and you meet these certain qualifications that are generally not specific to any individual, that's what we need to be going towards. We don't need policies that, especially because, there are groups of people out there who are like, oh, well, I've been shit on, forever. I'd like, I want something else. I want to be treated better. And it's like, that's not what he's like, that's not what I'm looking for. He said, I want policies that say, you are a human being. You committed this crime. This is your punishment, period. Doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter. You committed this crime. This is your punishment, period. And I'm like, yes, that's what we fucking need. You're a human being. You are a citizen of the United States. You get to vote. Doesn't matter about any of this other shit. If you meet those two qualifications, you're human and you're a U.S. citizen, you get to vote. Done.
Or at least the age. 18 and
well, yes. I mean, well, yes, there's specific things, but I'm like, okay, so 18, human, U.S. citizen, you get to vote. And we need to tear out all of that bullshit that prevents people from being able to do that. We need to tear out those, the systematic racism, everything. We need to tear that shit out. We need to reevaluate it, and we need to get back so that we can at least try to get everyone on the same footing. I mean, people are still, no matter who you are, you're going to have different things happen. You're going to, if you lose your parents at a young age, if you had a house fire, there are going to be things that set people back. There are going to be things that set people forward. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in making it so that it doesn't matter who you are, you can at least have the same basic rights. And like I said, that when he got that across in the book, and like I said, he talks about like that wasn't how he was growing up. Like he was militant. He was like, fuck the police. I hate white people. Y'all are all bastards or whatever. And then he has that realization and he's like, I need to center myself. I need to find out who I am and what I'm really about and what it is I'm against. And like I said, like literally it's middle of the road. And I do lean one way or the other politically, but I'm always for, hey, let's get to the middle of the road. That's what I'm really shooting for, is just balance. And I mean, that's something that years ago I tried to find in my life, and I'm still trying to find in my life, is trying to find balance. And it seems like when things go one way or the other too far, that's when I start having issues and everything else. And of course my needle's all over the place right now, but it's balance that I'm shooting for. And that's what I took away from the book. And what I really liked is he's looking for, balance between all races. Just like he said, being anti-racist, not putting in policies that help any particular, putting in policies that help everyone. So, Ray, final thoughts.
I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to kind of open my eyes a little bit more and take a bit of an evaluation of myself. And the next book I want to read is actually Jim Crow. The new Jim Crow is one of the ones that I was listed. So I actually threw this book out there with Jen back when it was all suggested because of a person that I follow. He's on the Steve Dangle podcast. His name is Jesse Blake. And he put these 5 books out there just saying, if you are interested. So he listed 5 of them, and one of them was the new Jim Crow. So I'll be listening to that one as well. But this, I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to take at least a step into becoming an anti-racist and doing what I can to there. I'm thankful that he acknowledged that he had racism and that it was amazing to me, the racist, how he was even admits that he's racist against his own race, and how that was actually built into
ethnic racism
and everything. So it was I don't know, it was just really well done. If you're at all even interested in please go listen to this book if you haven't done so, and take a look at what you're doing to try and at least help move the policies where they need to go.
Jen?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything that challenges me and makes me kind of think about my role and how I can contribute better, how I can help educate other people. I think that's where it all starts, right? I mean, we can protest, we can post on social media, we can do all these things, but if we're not actually looking at ourselves critically and committing to, changing our own behavior, our own thought process, then it doesn't really make a difference. It's all just kind of lip service. So, I mean, I was glad to read what I read. I'm going to finish it and then, try to keep educating myself. I will suggest for listeners who are interested, a couple podcasts that I've found helpful. 1619 it's like a short 6-episode series that starts in 1619 when the first ship full of slaves landed in the U.S. and it looks at kind of the repercussions of that over the years, the different parts of society. NPR has one called Code Switch, which looks at race issues, and then Pod Save the People on Crooked Media is another good one that kind of talks about a lot of this stuff. So if you're looking for other resources, I'd say, check those out. And then there's plenty of books out there as well.
Well, that is our episode for the month, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on to what else we might have been reading. We've all been pretty busy or sick or anything else. Jen, have you been reading anything else or?
No, not really.
Ray, anything else?
I re-listened because I'm trying to prepare for the Search for Bender. So I re-listened to the Bobiverse books. I need a little bit of hope. So. And that book gives me hope. Right? So
yes, it does.
So I re-listened to those, and then I've been re-listening to all the Harry Potters as well. Back onto Half-Blood Prince right now. So
very cool. I really haven't been listening to a lot of stuff. The other book that I read, just to tell you of the dedication I have for this show. Like I said, I was not really in the mind to read this book just because of everything that's going on in my life. The other book that I've started reading, and I've got about an hour left of it, is called It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine.
I think I have that book.
It's about grief and dealing with grief. And it's hard because, like I said, I know I'm having some anxiety and stuff right now, and just it's how my body is unfortunately coping with all of this. And plus there's just a bunch of other shit going on. But anyway, I have liked it just because when the reviews, I read, a lot of people were like, yes, thank you for writing this way, because she lost her partner suddenly, he drowns, and she's just like, I'm not trying to be offensive, but everyone who's come up to tell you that it's going to be okay, you're going to be okay, you're going to get through this, you're stronger than this, whatever, is bullshit. And I know you're trying to help, but just shut the fuck up. And not that I've really gotten that. The people, my friends and family, have been very understanding, and it's been, if you need to talk, if you need something, it's been more of that. And of course, that's what she says is, that's what's helpful. But like, and she talks, she's done, she was actually a therapist or whatever, and some of the horrendous things that she's heard people say, I'm just like, how could you ever say that to someone about, like, especially like if it was something blaming, well, they should have taken better care of themselves, or and it's just like, well, there's so-and-so died of cancer, she mentions, like, at one part, someone lost their child, and they're like, well, you're young, you could have another child. How the fuck do you tell that to someone? Like,
somebody that doesn't have a kid then.
Exactly.
It's like saying all grandparents matter. If your grandfather dies, like
yes,
the Black Lives Matter thing, all lives matter. Like,
and what's interesting is not only is she covering grief of just like loss of, loss of a person in your life. She doesn't really extend it too much to an animal, but she also brings up things like, this book is for anyone who maybe, you lost your leg for whatever reason. Like, things are never going to be the same. You're never going to get back to the way it was. That person in your life is never going to come back. This is about dealing with how are you going to go on, and however that's going to change you or whatever. And everyone does it differently. And so it's a good book. If for whatever reason, if you are going through something like this right now, it's probably a pretty good book to read. If you're not really going through anything heavy loss wise right now, I don't know if I'd recommend it. Like, maybe if you want to like prepare yourself for that mindset, like maybe if you have someone that unfortunately is terminally ill or something. But yeah, it definitely affects everyone differently, and it's very open about that. It's very much just like, however you handle it, just do what you have to do to keep going, and don't, unfortunately, most everyone who's trying to help you is full of shit. Don't listen to them. So, there was a little part of me that was like, well, I haven't really experienced that, thank God. But I have heard a couple of things here and there, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't really believe that. So whatever. Anyway, so that's what I've been reading. Hopefully more happy times coming up. So I read that entire series that Sean told us about, the Sailing in the Stars book or whatever, and the way it ends is okay. And he's like, well, there's technically another series. I'm like, I have to get that, so because I have to find out what happens. Anyway, well, thanks. That is our show for the month, ladies and gentlemen. Next month, we will finish the third book in the Star Wars trilogy, in the Aftermath trilogy, which is Empire's End. So if that's what you're looking for, come back then for it. As always, you can find us at epicallygeeky.com and Epically Geeky on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We do have the other shows, such as the Epically Geeky Show, the Marginally Geeky Show, Sustainably Geeky. And we've been trying to stay on a monthly episode release for all of those. We have procrastinators. We'll see about that. I saw Ray, rubbing his hands together like, sure. Oh, that's right. There's this other one. So where can we find you online, Jen?
You can find me here on all the geeky shows. Sustainably Geeky is the one that I host about the environment. And the one we'll be posting this month is about public lands. So that should be really cool. We'll also have a couple bonus episodes coming up to talk about some public lands in the works and see the process for turning those into national parks. So you can also find me on social media at Het's Gonna Be Me.
Ray, where can we find you online?
all the shows that you've already talked about, and then also on Instagram, the Reluctant Yeti, and sometimes on Facebook, you can search out for the artist Raymond Andrew, and you'll see my picture there. So, yeah.
Good deal. And as always, you can follow my individual wacky adventure online at Optimus Gene on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For everyone on the site, have a good night.